Let's start with yesterday's events. Samantha approached me with a disturbing lack of formality and told me she was planning a date with a colleague. My name is Andrew. I'm 32 years old and my wife Samantha is 33. We've been married for almost 8 years. We chose not to have children. Until recently, I considered our marriage stable and happy, but a few months ago, cracks began to appear. Samantha admitted that she felt trapped, that her life had become a constant routine. She even suggested having a baby to bring some excitement into our lives, even though it wasn't in our initial plans. I was open to the idea, but after a few brief discussions, she dismissed the idea, saying it was just a passing thought. I took it as a moment of discontent, not realizing it was the precursor to something much worse. Then yesterday she dropped the bombshell. She said calmly that she was going on a date. At first I thought she was joking, but the serious look in her eyes quickly dispelled any enjoyment I might have felt. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice betraying my skepticism. She explained that her colleague Larry also felt life was monotonous, and they had decided to change things up a bit. "Just dinner," she assured me. "Just a date," she said. It was the most natural thing in the world. Confused and angry, I asked why it was called a date. My dismay was palpable. Her response was that she wanted to be honest and transparent with me. The word hit me like a slap in the face. Before I could respond, she kissed my forehead dismissively and left to get ready. I sat there, motionless, as I watched her put on her favorite red dress, the one that made her feel confident and powerful. A sense of helplessness swept over me as the reality gradually surfaced. My life was falling apart. I needed to let off steam, so I called my best friend Alexander and asked him to meet for a drink. I was ashamed to admit the truth, so I made up a story about a friend whose wife seemed distant. Alexander tried to comfort me, saying it might just be a normal dinner, but I knew better. It was the beginning of the end. Samantha came home earlier than I expected, around 9:30 p.m. Her lipstick was smudged, her smile forced, and she exuded an energy of unrest. It was invigorating to be around her. "Andrew," she whispered, giving me a passionate hug, which was just what I needed. As if that wasn't enough, she casually mentioned plans for a weekend trip with Larry. My world collapsed. My anger left me speechless. That night, I couldn't bear to share the same bed with her and slept on the sofa all night. Sleepless, I was consumed by her betrayal. By morning, I accepted that our marriage was beyond repair, but I was determined to make her feel the sting of her actions. As Samantha busied herself preparing for the weekend getaway, I began to make my plans. I would not plead or argue, but ensure that she felt the sting of rejection as I had that Friday. I began serious preparations on Saturday. I hired a locksmith to replace all the locks in the house. I packed all her belongings into black garbage bags and neatly stacked them in the garage while she excitedly packed suitcases that evening. I quietly recorded her words to keep evidence of the divorce. I now consider a divorce inevitable. Before falling asleep, she kissed my cheek and said, "I love you, Andrew, and you'll see that everything will be fine." She had no idea what awaited her on Saturday morning. She left without a second thought. I watched from the window as Larry drove into the driveway. She walked out in a red dress, blew me a kiss, and got into his car. I didn't move until they disappeared down the street. At noon, the locksmith finished his work, and Samantha entered our home and my right to live was revoked. I removed her name from the mailbox and prepared for her return that night. I stayed home alone, the house now a reflection of my solitude. When Samantha returned on Sunday evening, she was disheveled, her hair a mess, her eyes red and puffy from crying, and her red dress rumpled. She tried to open the door, but realized the key no longer worked. She started the door and called my name. I could see her desperate expression through the monitor. Finally, I opened the door. Tears were streaming down her face. She asked me what was going on and why, "Andrew, why were you doing this?" She tried to squeeze past me, but I blocked her way. "Samantha, you wanted a thrill," I said. My voice was cold and firm because I saw her pleading eyes. "Now you've got it." At that moment, my life collapsed and was irrevocably changed. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? Isn't it?" she pleaded, her voice choking, tears running down her cheeks, the icy road leaving marks on her face as her body trembled in the bone-chilling cold. My phone was in my hand, playing the incriminating recording of her gleefully describing the weekend's plans for adventure. When she realized she'd been destroyed by you, the color drained from her face. "Samantha, now you must bear the consequences," I said, my tone cold. Her response was a flurry of panicked apologies, a litany of excuses, accusations against Larry, insistence that things weren't as bad as they seemed. But her defense was irrelevant. She had made her decision, turned her back on us, and now expected me to repair the irrevocable damage. I didn't argue. I just pointed to the packed suitcase in the garage and said, "Take your things and go. If you want excitement, go find it yourself." I slammed the door behind me and heard her muffled sobs in the cold air. She wandered outside for a while, perhaps hoping I'd change my mind, but I didn't. The divorce papers would be served soon, and no matter which version of the story ended up prevailing, she would not return to my life after she left. I felt like a survivor, searching through the rubble of a war. I quickly filed for divorce and made sure the divorce papers were sent to her parents' house. She no longer had a stable address. I heard she was staying with Julia, an old friend who probably didn't know the full extent of Samantha's betrayal. Despite leaving Samantha, she didn't leave peacefully. She kept texting, calling, and desperate voicemails, and even her mother cried and begged me to reconsider. But the betrayal was too deep, and every attempt to contact me reopened old wounds, reminding me of her carefree laughter, of the way she packed for Larry that fateful weekend, of her audacity in defying my requests. It was torture, and I couldn't forgive or forget. As expected, things escalated one Wednesday afternoon when I was at work sifting through reports and overheard her pleading with the receptionist in a frantic voice. I stepped out of my office to find her unkempt and holding divorce papers in her hands. Her face was puffy from crying. "What do you want, Samantha?" I asked sharply. I led her into an anteroom while my colleagues avoided the scene. She thrust the unsigned papers at me. "I can't do it, Andrew. I love you, please." I looked at her, and she was no longer the vibrant woman I had once loved. The spark of arrogance and thrill-seeking had been replaced by raw desperation. I replied, "You have made your choice. Now you must live with the consequences." She suddenly sobbed, mumbling that she had made a mistake, admitting that she had sought thrills but had only reaped regret. "You are the only person I have ever loved," she whispered, and my chest tightened with anger. "You thought you could flirt with disaster and come back unscathed. You can't undo what you've done." She held out her hand to me, but I stepped back. "I've already given you my answer." I said I was leaving her. The silence that followed her departure was heavy and strangely liberating. She stopped holding out her hand. I heard through mutual friends that she had started therapy. It was a step in the right direction for her, but not enough to fix what was broken. I wasn't ready to let her go that easily. All the information, including text messages, booking records, and a detailed timeline of her betrayal, and sent it to her parents. The accompanying message read, "This is why I can't go back. This is why it's over." The next day I received a voicemail from her. Her voice trembled with vulnerability, each word accompanied by a shaky breath. She said, "I received your package. I understand, Andrew. I see the damage I've caused, how deeply I've hurt you. I can't make it right, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I understand." Her confession, stripped of defenses and excuses, came as a relief that surprised me for the first time. A few weeks later, she admitted to the gravity of her actions. The divorce was finally finalized without further drama. She signed the papers, moved back in with her parents, and I stayed behind to reclaim the home we had shared. I methodically removed all traces of her, turning the space into something that was entirely mine. The suffocating silence brought peace. For the first time in years, I began to rebuild myself. Instead of focusing on the outside world, I looked inward, freeing myself from the bonds of a broken relationship. Loneliness was not loneliness, but ultimate liberation. I knew the storm had finally passed and I could breathe again. I embraced a rigorous fitness regime, reignited my love of hiking, and picked up my passion for painting, which I had long neglected during this period of transition. Alexander remained a firm support, encouraging me to keep going, especially when the feeling of exhaustion began to overwhelm me. Slowly, I rediscovered the person I once was. It was then that Samantha tried to reconnect with me. She sent another heartfelt letter, apologizing and detailing the steps she had taken to rebuild her life. I chose not to respond. Her admission that she had caused harm was enough for me. She embarked on another journey that no longer intersected with mine. Days turned into months, seasons changed, and I was no longer the same man who had been powerless to watch his wife's broken figure as she got ready for another man. I had become stronger, and perhaps wiser. I gradually came to understand an important truth. No matter how dark it gets, and how much it swallows everything, the light is always within reach, if you just have the courage to look for it. On one of my hikes with Alexander, we met a group of strangers on the trail, including a kind and friendly woman named Emily, whose warm smile seemed to lighten my load. Emily joined us that day, and as we walked together, I found myself smiling from the bottom of my heart for the first time in years. Our small talk became more frequent, and I ended up inviting her for coffee. What happened between us was not a whirlwind romance, but a simple and sincere emotion. Through spending time with Emily, I learned a profound truth. Love doesn't require exaggerated actions or dramatic performances. What true love requires is consistent, sincere companionship and mutual respect. Andrew's life has reached its end. Samantha chose her own path and bore the consequences, while Andrew refused to let betrayal define him. He took back his life and found a way to move forward. Will Emily be his forever? Only time will tell, but one thing is for sure. Andrew has learned that no matter how hard he falls, there is always a way to get back up. The story ends here. If you like it, please press like and subscribe to the channel.